This podcast is the result of my passion for languages and for talking to people. I have conversations with language professionals who are willing to share their experience. We focus on their work, but also on how their love for languages has shaped their personal lives. I started my career as a researcher in terminology, but I found my passion for working directly with clients when I lived in the United States and started working as a language consultant for global companies like Sony, Apple, and Google. When I came back to Europe, I was introduced to the world of LSPs, where I had multiple roles: project manager, vendor manager, and terminologist. Now that I am fully dedicated to my own projects, I provide language services in English and Portuguese, mentoring and consulting for the localization industry, and of course, I'm also a podcaster. Find out more on LinkedIn or Instagram and get in touch if you'd like to explore how I can help you with your projects. I am Rita Prazeres Gonçalves, the language worker. This podcast is also available on YouTube. Hi, everybody. This is super special. To begin with, as you can tell, I am looking somewhere and showing up like I'm looking somewhere else. So this is because, of course, I had a malfunction. You can tell by my frozen photo, not really flattering, but this is what we got. So not to have everybody log in and out again. So we decided to just keep it as is because all that matters is the guests and not me, because you already know me and you're tired of me anyway. So here we are today. This is a brand new type of episode where I invite people separately, right? So I invited each one of them separately. And then the result is that we're going to have a conversation with people who don't know each other. So they don't really know much about their work, what each other does, and what their background is. So I thought it was really interesting for everybody to actually get to know each other at the same time, including you and us. So that's how it's going to go this time. So I'll say that I've known Mónia. I've known her name for many years in the context of working in my agencies, in my LSPs, and all of that. She was always part of my database, as I say. So she's a pretty well-known Portuguese translator in other areas too. And this is how I know her name. And only recently, I guess a week or two ago, we met in a networking event. So we don't really know each other much more than that. So this is all I know from Mónia, right? So then we have Keith, and I don't know anything about Keith. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. So you have to help me in a minute. I love that noun pronouncing part of things. And then we have Barbara. If I had to read it in English, I would say Neeb. So she will help us with that. I will start actually with, let's go with Barbara. So Barbara, if you could just present yourself briefly, not with too much information, because then we will have our questions, we will talk, we will discuss, and all of that stuff. Okay, so who's Barbara?
Okay, Barbara Neeb, because I'm German. Mm-hmm. I live in Frankfurt, and I translate literature now for about more than 25 years. And I translate from Italian, French, and English. English is the least, so at least you have to excuse my scare English. I usually don't talk English.
No, you're totally fine.
I can talk better Italian, and I translate it into German. Mm. I translate just normal literature, also children books and cooking books. Wow. And yeah. So I think that's it.
Yeah,
and I work most of the time. I work with my colleague Katharina Schmidt, and we are working in a duo, a tandem. So we are translating together literature, which is not the norm. As usually you translate alone, but we prefer it. We found each other, and we think it's a very good way to work together, because you are not lonely. You are together. You can check it out, and you can discuss. And we also have always find a way to be one person, to speak as one person in the end, as the final product. You can never tell who did it.
I love it.
So
yeah, that is pretty original, I think. Okay, so we'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. So Keith, what's the story?
My name is Keith Geaney. I am a British-Irish expat living in France for the past 17 odd years.
Mhm.
My core speciality is legal translation, and I'm an in-house translator at the moment. So I'm a relative newcomer to the literary translation market. I have so far translated 2 novels from French into English. So that's my literary experience as a translator so far.
Very good. And then Mónia.
Hello, thanks for having me, Rita.
Of course.
So I'm Mónia. I'm a translator for more than 15 years now, but as a literary translator, I've only started in 2019. I translate from English and German into Portuguese, and I will be happy to provide more information after this.
After this short intro.
Yeah.
So very good. Let's go back into the beginning of times. So Barbara, you studied, I think, languages and literatures, right? You're French and you're Italian. Was it like this? So what was college like?
Yes. Yes, a little bit, but really, I really studied translation. I'm a Diplom-Übersetzerin, which is usually very it's unusual for literature translators because usually they just study German, French, but I studied it really translating. Sorry, at Heidelberg, and yes, it was at the beginning. You are trained to translate everything and not really something special. But I also translated manuals for. I started with manuals, but my dream was translating literature. So because when I started at school and what are you going to do? I always said I want to do something with German, because I love the German language, German literature. So I wanted to do something with German, and choosing journalist and something I didn't know. And attraction was, oh yes, languages, and then yes, Italian. And I started with you can study. I didn't know even before that you can study translation sciences. So I studied this, and it was, yes, I was fine with it. And then the way to enter the literature business is quite difficult. But now, since I'm only I really only translate literature, nothing else now. I always at the beginning I had manuals and literature, but now it's only literature, and it's not so much paid, but it's a great satisfying.
I like that. So what about Keith? I tried to find out anything about your college life, and then I got there to LinkedIn, where it's my great source of information, as you all know. And then it said that you went to Oxford University, and then it says something, I don't even know if I can pronounce this word correctly. So jurisprudence? It said something like that. So I'm like, oh my God, the
fancy
man
Oxford
studied.
name for law.
Exactly. I was like, oh, the man studied law. Okay, so then why law, and how was the transition from studying law into this? I guess your first jobs were already in the language business. Am I right?
Yes, I chose law because I liked the intellectual challenge of it. But I got out of university realizing I wanted to do something different. So I relied on my languages, which I did for A-levels, and started working for a translation agency as a temp. And that became a 2-year contract. And I then left another translation agency for another year or so. And by then I felt I knew enough about the industry to go freelance as a translator of my own accord. And so I spent the next 10 years or so freelancing, and then I've been in and out of salaried employment ever since. I've been a translator overall for about 20 years now. But literary translation I started just before the pandemic, so 3 years ago now. And I found, because I just started up again as a freelancer, and I found a platform called BabelCube, which is where authors can place books they want translated, and translators can contact them, and It's done on a royalties basis, so there's no fee as such. You get paid depending on how it sells.
Oh, I see.
I found my first novel translation.
Okay, that sounds good. I had no idea. So see, I don't know anything about this. So Mónia, it's been a long career before you got into the literature
Yeah.
thing, but you did study. I mean, I've seen that you're Portuguese, so it's kind of what I know too. So you have done a pretty standard kind of, you have a standard kind of background for a lot of the translators that I know in Portugal. So you have studied your literature, right? To begin with.
Yes, English and German literature and language. And you know that at that time there was no translation course.
Yes, I do know. So there was no translation degree like a BA in Portugal.
Yeah. So in the
at
end
that
of
time.
the 4 years, we had to choose whether we wanted to be a teacher, to follow a teacher path, or I did then a post-graduation in translation.
So that
German.
was the standard way of becoming a
Yeah.
translator in Portugal back in the day, probably 20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, 20 years ago. Oh my God.
Let's not talk about those numbers so much, I guess. If they bother you, they don't bother me.
And this post-graduation actually gave me the opportunity to take an Erasmus semester abroad in Germany. And I fell in love with Berlin. It was a great city. And then I decided to come back and to work there. So it helped me a lot with my German. I lived there for 4 years after my graduation. And then after these 4 years, when I came back to Portugal, I decided, okay, I want to try the translation out, because there was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a translator. And that's how it was. I took an internship, a non-paid internship, actually, because I had saved money, and I thought it would be a nice way to get in the industry, because I didn't know anybody. And so I sent an application to some agencies proposing a non-paid internship only for a month, for me, to see if I enjoyed it, if I liked it, and see if I got any talent at all. And it worked out pretty great. And I stayed there. After this month, they offered me like a contract with a salary. And I worked as an in-house translator in 2 different agencies for 7 years.
Oh.
And then I decided to go freelance.
But you still worked in all of your technical, I guess this is your specialization, right? Technical.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So when I decided to go freelance, I still had, because there was everything I knew about it. I had this experience in the technical stuff, although it gets pretty boring and repetitive, because it's always, for me at least, because I'm a very creative person.
Yeah, right.
So I need to have this feeling of fulfillment in the end of the day, that I did something that I enjoyed. And that was not always the case with the technical stuff. So in 2019, I decided that I wanted to try the literary translation out, and I took like a mentoring program with the literary translator, just to see, if I had it in me. And then I took a few writing courses, because I was stuck in the rigidity of the technical text. So I needed to free my writing style. And in 2019, I contacted the first publishing house, and it all started. And then it was like a snowball.
I see. Keith, I have to say that I found out that we have one thing in common in our past.
What's that?
It's the fact that we both work for Trust Perfect, right? I saw that. I was like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. So that's what happened. That's what we have in common in our past.
So when were you there?
I was there from 1912 to 2012. Right. I've been looking at ancient texts.
Good looking.
Time travel.
Wow. Ugh. So
Small world.
2012, and then to 2014. So it was 2 years. Very intense 2 years, as you can. I always say it's 2 years that were the same as 10. So
Yeah, I think that bears up with my experience as well.
yeah,
It's a pretty
exactly. So
intense
that's
place.
That's like a
how come.
century.
That was just for Keith and I to have a connection here, right? And one of the things that happened is that I didn't do it on purpose, but all of you guys are German speakers, and I guess very advanced German speakers. I mean, not obviously Barbara being German, but I guess Mónia and Keith are both real German speakers, because being a German speaker is something that we could discuss as Portuguese people is very funny, because people just study a little bit. Some of them feel very confident. They say that they already speak. They don't. Others have studied many, many years. They never feel confident to say that they do speak German. So I guess it's a subject here for us. I'd love to speak German. If I could just wake up and one day would speak a language, that would definitely be number one, and Arabic number two. Everybody knows that. So I say it all the time. So I am a frustrated German non-learner. So that's me. So that's the story. But then Barbara said, I translate normal, right? Normal literature. And I love that normal literature thing. So we will find out. But one of the reasons why I invited you guys before I go any further is because every time I go to university and talk to translation students, the funny thing about it is that there will be a huge percentage of the kids in the room that will say that they want to be literary translators, right? And because it's a thing that is so far-fetched from my experience and my knowledge and all of that, I really wanted to bring 3 people from 3 different countries just to see what your outlook is on the way that these things actually happen in your life, because I see it almost as a mystical type of thing that doesn't follow the same path or the same anything as the other types of translations that we know. But because all of us have worked in that side of things, I have loads of material and episodes about that. So this time I thought, well, let's do this. Let's go into this more mystical realm of things and see what the story is. So then, Barbara, how did things really happen? How did it start, and how did you really get into it? And then what is this normal literature that you translate?
Okay. Is that normal literature? Because sometimes people ask me, "Oh, whom did you translate?" And then they say, "I have no classicals, and I just have normal literature." You don't know any of these authors. You go into a bookshop, and there is a huge amount of books, and you know only some of them. But when I say, okay, I translated Simone Di Fulvio, not everybody can translate Harry Potter or something like this. So
Right,
it's
of
just
course.
normal literature.
What you mean is not necessarily mainstream books that everybody knows of, or those big authors or classic authors like those, I don't know, James Joyce's and whomever comes to your mind, because I'm a terrible literature person. So I don't know how to talk about that. But so you mean, so how do your authors come into your life? Do you do it through the publishers? Do you do it directly with the authors? How does that process go? I bet it's not always the same, but more or less a few different paths that you follow in order to get your books.
Okay, in Germany, usually you contact an editing house, and you don't, even if you have some authors you would like to be published in Germany, but you can't just start translating and then go to the publishers. Then no, the way is you go first to publishers, and some of them answer, some of them don't. And if you are lucky, so with Mónia, it's just like a snowball system. For me, it was never like a snowball system. I always had, still in my with my age and with my experience, I have to contact always new publishers. I go to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I make contacts, I make dates, and then we are talking to the editors from the publisher's house. And so when they have something, a good book that would fit for me, they ask me, and then I get the book. Only one book, I have to say it because I'm very proud of it, is this one. This was first. It's a very nobody knows the author, not even in Italy. But this was I read the book and I said, yes, I want to be this book translated. And I contacted a publisher's house, and actually, really, they said, okay, yes, it's a good book, and it was a good book. And so this is the very first time in my whole life of translating
that it was your idea.
Yes, yeah.
So is it called Matanza? Is that what it is?
Yeah, Matanza. It's Matanza.
It's killing. It's the killing, or that's not what it means at all.
Yeah, yes, it's killing. It's the ritual of killing tuna fish in south of Italy. It's this it's really like a slaughtery.
Yeah.
They slaughtering the fish.
Yeah, I know what it is. Yes, I have that image.
Yeah. But this book is about a young woman who is born in the 60s, and you follow her life through the changes of the town, the life from the beginning, success, and going down. But it's very, very it's lovely. It's a great book.
So the name is just to give you context of some sort of a place,
because
or
she is the woman is born as the leader of this in the family, who always leading this ritual, the fisherman, and she is now as a woman in Italy. It's very strange, but because there were no male wie sagt man, Erben. There were no male.
There are no men to follow the path of the family, so she has to take over.
So she has to be as a woman, and she started this, and she has a good, it's a success. But then the fish, there's no fish more. In the 19s, the fish was gone in the middle, in the Mediterranean, and then the tourists coming, immigrants. It's the whole story of Sicily.
Oh, sounds very intense and interesting.
It is. It's a great book, and and it was really, when you see that the author, every word is written with intention. And you have to think about every word and put the sentences, and even if you don't understand, then you have to think about it and put it in the German, and then it has to sound, and then they have to this voice, and this is fun.
Oh yeah, she's very passionate about this book. We can tell, right? What about Keith? So you go into this Babel Cube, right?
Yes.
So do you get work from other places, or are you getting started and this place seemed like the right place to start?
Well, the second book I translated, I acquired word of mouth via LinkedIn, actually, because I mentioned the fact that I've been translating this first book. And so people started tagging me in posts about book translations. So I got in touch with the author of the second one. Cool. Talked about expectations, deadlines, budget, and that sort of thing. And we stayed in both times for both books. The author and I stayed in regular contact.
So while you were translating, you had access to the author.
Yes, which was very important, because I could ask them, which direction it is heading, what exactly are this character's motivations for doing this and that, and what does this specific scene look like in your mind, and all that kind of thing.
So you like this fiction books, right?
They've both been science fiction books so far.
Oh,
yes.
science
but that's
fiction.
More of a coincidence than anything else, I suppose.
So do you see yourself going into that path, like specializing in, because I had never considered this science fiction thing, but are you considering specializing, or do you think that this was just a coincidence and you're open to any other genres?
I'm open to most.
You have to correct me if I say ridiculous things, right? Because I'm not used to talking about this.
That's all. No, I mean, I think my one rule is, if I'd enjoy reading it, then I'd be happy to translate it.
Because you're a writer too, so I saw that on LinkedIn. Of course, my KGB friends.
Yes. So I think that
So as a writer, do you also write that type of material, or what kind of writer are you compared to the kind of translator that you are in terms of your literary translation path? Wow. love
well,
this question.
that's a good question.
So what do you think?
One published book so far has been a collection of short stories,
Hmm.
which I wrote. I wrote as a competition to begin with. I launched on LinkedIn, and I had 10 genres. And each genre.
The 10 short stories were in different 10 genres.
Yes.
Wow.
Because the idea was I had 10 genres. 10 people could then pick the genre they wanted, and they give me a keyword, like something that had to feature in the story. So I then wrote those 10 stories and published them. And so it's not science fiction as such, although science fiction was one of the genres. So
you think there's a parallel, or there will be a parallel as your career as a literary translator develops a parallel between what you enjoy writing and what you will translate?
I'd like to think so. I mean, I think you're naturally drawn towards the kind of material that interests you. I have had people mention me in adverts for books that I wouldn't necessarily read, and therefore I didn't really feel suitable for translating. And there's been one time recently where I saw an advert on LinkedIn looking for a translator. So I applied to the person who was acting as an agent for the author, and they told me that it's a female author who's specifically looking for a woman translator. That's fair enough. I can't compete with that.
That's true. At least for now. So we don't know in the future. So Mónia, how is it with your, I don't know anything about your literary translation career. So what is the story? What was your first movie about? Did you feel a connection? Were you in contact with the author? I suppose not. I have no idea how that goes.
No, well, in Portugal, normally you work for publishing houses. And if you have any question to the author, if it's really necessary, if you don't really get it at all, or if there's a mistake, you find a mistake in the original, it can happen. Then you have to go through the publishing house, and they will contact the author. Okay, but they don't really like doing that. Just in the worst case scenario. So I have contacted a first publishing house because I knew someone who worked there, and I just said, yeah, I would like to try if you have anything at all from German and English. And this is a small publishing house specialized in self-help books and books about lifestyle, time management.
That's what I would translate.
Yeah, and I started with the proofreading. They needed a proofreader for a book.
So it was a Portuguese author.
No.
It was a translation that needed to be proofread.
Translation. Yeah, after that there came a Portuguese author, so I worked directly with the author. That was the only time, I think, that I worked directly with the author. And then they gave me a first book to translate. It was a book about time management. And after that, everything that came after that was by word of mouth. In Portugal, it's common that the publishing houses don't put any ads for translators because it takes a lot of time, and they need one translator like for yesterday, like usually, as always. And so they ask around other publishing houses, or they ask around they ask their own translators. Or on LinkedIn, do you know anyone? Do you happen to know, like, I need a German translator? Do you know anyone? And that's
how it's pretty
it
old school, huh?
It is, yeah. I've seen only once or two ads for publishing houses, like in the last 5 years. So,
wow.
Yeah. So now I'm working for 5 or 6 or maybe 7 different publishing houses, and I have never sent a single CV or a single application
So they don't really ask you about your qualifications and any
They
of
will
that. So
ask. They will.
for
They will
your
ask.
history as a literary
They will.
translator.
They will.
but-
They ask for my resume after,
Ah.
but it's a recommendation, so it's a reference from other translators or other publishers, and so they already know. Okay,
Well,
maybe
she should be fine.
well, she should be fine. And they contact me. They say what they have in mind, the price and everything. And if I agree, then they ask me for my CV, and yeah, that's it.
Wow. So it's very different. Like I say, it's something I don't know anything about. That's why I thought I would have 3 people to talk to me about it, and so that I could be a bit more informed. And so, Barbara, you were talking about, since we started talking about money, so let's go into that without going into that, obviously. So do you feel like there is, well, this is a strange moment to talk about economics and translation, right? But still, let's think about the history of your activity as a translator, not necessarily focusing on the now, obviously. So did you feel in the beginning when you did your studies, your translation studies and all that, and you started working on your technical manuals and all the things that you did, there were more classic, let's say, and well, like all of us know that part well, I guess. So how did you feel from that perspective, from an economic perspective? How did you feel when you stopped working with your usual technical stuff and started dedicating yourself only to this literary, normal literary translations?
I didn't even. What is the question? I didn't.
The question is, in terms of the economics, so
Yeah.
in terms of prices, things like that,
Yeah.
how did you feel? Was there a gap? Was it very different? Did you feel like you made more
Okay.
money if you had continued on the technical path? Just in abstract, obviously.
Yes. No, we are very in Germany. We are very open about prices because we
Okay.
say 20 years, 20 euro, 1 page, and it didn't. And it's 20,000 euros income. It's just when you are only literature translator, you only have this. So
Oh.
because you only get 20 euro for 1 page.
Mm.
So and it's since 20 years it didn't increase.
Uh-huh.
It really decreased the income. So yes, when I stopped my normal translating manuals, it was half of my income was gone because really I was a victim of globalization because I didn't. It was I worked with a company and in Italy, and I never have to translate more in Italian because the company was in Switzerland, and she said, "Okay, can translate Turkish or something like this?" Because the manuals are only the machines are. Okay, I switch. Stop this. It's
Yes, don't worry.
too complicated.
Restart.
Just say this. If you work as a normal translator, you get the double of the income of a literature translator. Just
Okay.
within this terms, and we only want to make ourselves visible. I, as a literature translator, I also make. I have a. I work with the Weltlesebühne, which is what is a company? A Verein. How do you say this?
Association.
Association, yes. Of other
I
literature.
always thought it would be handy to have other people who speak German. And it was.
And we want to make literature translation visible. That's also a reason because I'm here, because we want ourselves to get visible. And we say, okay, we don't get this money. Maybe sometimes we get more money. So it's, but we still love our job because as you said, Mónia, it's creative. It's great, and we love this. But it would be nice to have more money.
But may I ask, Barbara, the 20 euro per page, is it how many words or how many characters?
It's 1,800 characters.
Character, 1,800. Okay, it's the same as in Portugal. Okay.
Yes, but usually it's less because we have page, and in the page for the sometimes it's there are less characters, so it's also 1,600 in the usual. And we have only you get only
Mónia
20.
is calculating things.
Yes.
Yeah, because she when she said 20 euros per page, I was like, what? It's amazing. In Portugal it's half, and that's for the biggest publishing houses. That the small publishing houses, they pay 8, 7. Yeah.
Still,
of course,
still less.
that's another standard, right? In Portuguese, we have different standards than in Germany, of course. But yeah, still.
Yes, but you can't really live on 20
yeah,
because when you translate a book, at least it gets 10 pages a day, and this is very good. But usually you translate 4 or 5 pages if you resume all the because you don't translate, but then you have to edit again and
everything. Yeah, and after that you have to pay the taxes, of course.
Yes. Yes. We pay taxes.
Yes, I know that. I imagined. So Keith, what's your situation? So you're getting started with your literary translator. This is even hard to say. Literary translation career. It's a mouthful, right? So how do you do it? Do you still do your legal translations and all of that? Do you think you're going to be dedicating yourself, for example, to legal books in the future, or which is not really literary translation, obviously, but maybe in that format you don't have experience, or you do. I have a friend who only translates that type of material, but she's Spanish. But yeah, that's what she does. She translates she has a PhD in law and all of those regular things in law that people have, and she's a real person, right? A real law person, and she does that. So I know that exists, right? That you have specific publishing houses as such that actually only publish law-related books, if this is correctly said. So what do you think it's coming for you in terms of the next few steps?
Well, I mean, my legal training is 20 years old now. So it's a little bit out of date. So I'm not a proper legal person, as you put it. So I wouldn't translate modern law books. But I'm basically looking to see what comes up. I mean, it's a very much a parallel stream for me because I do have a full-time job as a translator.
You have a full-time job? Oh,
I do, yes. But if a project comes up that looks interesting to me and I have the time, I would maybe take it on. But yes, it will be definitely focusing on fiction rather than textbooks or anything like that.
So you feel like it's also a creative outlet for you, or so it's more than work? It's other thing that, I mean, if you're a writer, you probably have that in you, different than someone like me.
It's an enjoyable form of work. I mean, it is like any other project in that you have a deadline, you have a budget, you have deliverables, but it's more creative, as you say.
So you're not, because you have your fixed income, are you not as worried about the type of income that you might have from this other stream, or is that something you think about a lot, or is that something you discuss with your friends, or how's that subject in your life?
Well, I mean, the 2 books I've translated so far have been totally different experiences from the other, because the first one was royalties only. So the book didn't sell massively well, so I basically haven't earned anything from that. Whereas the second one, the author had an actual budget dedicated to translation. So he set the prices up in front. I got a down payment so I could start working. And overall, I made about the same as I would have made doing regular translation projects. So that worked out pretty well. But it all depends on the situation.
Okay, this royalty thing only, it's very interesting to me, because I'm interested in royalties from a music perspective because it's what I know best, but I had never thought about it from that perspective of the translation itself. So do you have this experience, Mónia, from working with royalties, or not so much?
I've translated one book, a book for children in barbecue,
Mm.
but the thing is, they only pay you the royalties above £10,
Mhm.
and this book, well, nobody buys the book, so I'm still waiting for my royalties like for 5
Yeah,
years.
same here. Same for me.
So that's how it goes. Barbara, don't go there. Just kidding.
Yes, but in Germany, we had to fight a lot, literature translators, to get the royalties.
Mhm.
And I have to say, when you work with when you have a book that sells, then with royalties, you can really get something. Yes,
Yeah, substantial.
It's part of the income. It's because in my first years there were no royalties because they only author and publisher house, and now so translators get royalties. And yes, it's like other
So is it
people
a
get
law in Germany that the translators get to have royalties, or how is that worked out?
No, you
No.
have there is a I think translating industry is always, it's like there is nothing, there are no laws,
Uh-huh.
but there are we had some we said Urteile, the basic
The basic agreement, or
yes, agreements, and
just trying to guess?
it was a cause in front of the okay.
Of the went to court. It was a court.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
and basic at the decision that the royalties have to be paid also for translators, and usually you have it in the contract. It's the contract that counts, and publishing houses pay as a. Now I can choose, and I say without royalties, I won't. At least I have to get the royalties because it's important.
And how much in percentage, obviously, would that be? Is it a variable thing, obviously, but how usually
Yes.
is it like a 7%, 8%? Is it something like that, or
less, from 2 to 6% of the netto Ladenpreis in Germany. It's without taxes, so
right.
And sometimes it's only about 2 cents of a book, but if you sell 10,000 books, yes, it will sum up. So and Mónia, I have to say, the €20 a page is what we want to get. Usually they pay less. So
Okay.
this is only, sometimes I get more, but usually it's less.
It also, I'm assuming it also depends on the publishing house.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And usually even the smaller ones pay better than the big ones, because the big ones, then they have the name, but the big ones won't say. And also, for example, children's books are always paid less. You have the
Really?
same work, but it's children's books.
Listen to this kid.
Yeah.
Children have less money.
Yeah.
And they are not necessarily easier to translate, right?
I bet.
And when you have only a few words, it's really sometimes only for the children's book, you have 10 words in or some every page. And no, it's really hard work, but it's only children's book.
I see. I understand that, because to be honest, I see very complicated words in children's books that I don't understand in Portuguese. So I can only imagine how it is to translate them if you have to. I mean, it's
and
insane,
sometimes
because
you
they
have
need
to rhyme.
Exactly. They rhyme, but they're like, oh, are these regular words that people actually say? No, obviously not. So it's so funny that you do that. I look at them from that perspective, right? They're usually, in my opinion, translated or not, whatever, they're very hard to read. So this is how I see it. They might rhyme, but the words don't make any sense. They're using words that are not mainstream, so I don't understand why this is, but I'm sure there's a reason for that. And there's many books in Portuguese like that, so I bet it's the same for every language. I'm like, how are children going to understand half of this? It's like, especially the adjectives, it's just funny, strange ways of things, like super outdated or something like that. It's so hard. So I don't think I would ever be able to even remotely approach a children's book from that perspective. I mean, I would be too scared for sure. So you've done the one with royalties, right, Mónia? Do you feel the same? Is it very hard? Is it very strange?
Well, I've done this one with royalties, but on barbecue, because in Portugal, we give up the royalties. We don't, the translators have no right to have royalties. Okay. So with the contract, when I signed the contract, I give up my all the rights.
You write there in the contract that yes, you give them up. Yeah, I've done that for songs. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I receive the payment for the translation, and that's it.
That's that. Yeah.
Even if it's a bestseller.
So, well, before we go, let's hear about. I have a fantasy of one day maybe pairing up with Mónia. You never know. And translating spirituality books, right? So that would be, if I could ever, that would be the thing, right? I'd love to do that. Obviously pairing up, because I've now, before I say anything else, let me hear about Barbara pairing up with her friend. How did that come about? Because I'm so interested in knowing this, because it's very original, I think. I'm sorry. Then I'll ask the question.
Okay, we met a few years ago, 15 years ago now, and because I had a book. It was another one I presented to publishing houses. I wanted to translate. She got the contract, but she always wanted to translate with somebody together, because she thought it's a lonely business. I just want to make this experience, and we made the experience, and it worked well, even if we have totally different backgrounds. She comes from music. She started as a opera director, and I come from, yes, I really am a normal translator, studied really translating science. And we have also different approaches. I'm more visual, and she is more musical. She has more the sound in the ear. I have more the logical. I keep the logical view. So when you translate literature, you also have, yes, when you have a fight, for example, with in the medieval story, you have to take the sword and put it this way, and it really has all still to sound. So it doesn't have to be more like a manual, but it has to be really, like a film. So and I had this perspective, and then we work together. So we take a book and say, you translate 20 pages, I translate 20 pages, and then we switch our translations. And we do only a raw version. So it's and we switch, and the more part is the editing part, but it's like editing, but a little bit more translating, editing. So, and then we switch again and accept the solutions or not. And sometimes if we don't get a solution, we discuss. And this is very good.
So with the constraints of time that you have in the industry, how do you manage this partnership? Because it's even harder in terms of time, I suppose, if you're looking at each other's work.
Not because you have these 3-4 ways of translating. You usually do it alone. Now we do it only switched, which makes it your spare time. Because it's not that I have to, and when you always read your own translation, you don't get any better solution. But if you read a text from the other person, say, "Oh no, this is you can't say it," just and you at once you get the right solution when you have a external view on the translation instead of intern. And you always say, okay, I say this sentence doesn't sound good, but I don't get a solution. So the other person, my partner, gets it.
Wow.
Or I get it for her. So it's a good way. And yes, we have only half of the income, but we have usually it's
Double the
only
happiness.
yeah, but it's not double the time you spend on the text. It's also half of the time you spend on the text.
Mm-hmm. So by yourself or in partnership, what is like your dream book in terms of course, it's something that you find and then you're like, oh, this is amazing. I really want to translate this. But in abstract, what would be this ideal book? What kind of genre? What is it a lengthy book? Is it a medieval? You mentioned medieval. I like medieval stuff a lot. So what kind of things really move you and would be like, oh, this is my dream project? Let's say that. It's when I have creative people, I ask this.
Okay, yeah, yes. I really have no a dream on genres because I'm open for every genre, I say, because I have crime stories, I translated medieval stories and fantasy. But it's like I said for the Matanza, a dream book is when you really know the author thought about what he was writing. And this is very important for me. So and you can make it sound in German. This is what I dream of, and it was very close to my dream. When you have something you don't understand every sentence, then you have to think about it, but it sounds great, and you want to have the same sound with other words in another language with another rhythm. Yes.
That's your dream. The sound is very important, I suppose.
Yes, the sound is very important.
Mm-hmm. So, Keith, now that you have tried your 10 genres, right, and you have, as a translator, experienced the science fiction more than anything, so what would be your dream project? More science fiction things or in one of the 10 genres that you already know?
Well, I've always enjoyed a good thriller, something with a bit of suspense and mystery.
We have an intruder.
Yeah, so but yeah, something with twists and turns, characters that really unfold and develop.
It's like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing, or none of that?
Not so much fantasy. I don't read much fantasy, although maybe if it's a sufficiently mysterious fantasy.
Mm-hmm. So you prefer the twists and turns of reality than the ones in fantasy?
Yes, I like a good spy thriller. And
so reality is stranger than fiction.
It certainly can be.
Yeah. So tell me about it, Mónia. What is your dream book translation project?
Well, I would love to translate into Portuguese some books from Judith Hermann or Julie Thier. They are contemporary German writers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by Julie Thier, there is already a book translated into Portuguese, but she's not very well known, so I don't know if they are going to keep
have more.
Yeah. But in terms of genres, I'm still figuring out what I like to translate. For example, now I'm doing a thriller, and I'm really enjoying it because I also like reading thrillers. So it's like, to translate what you enjoy reading, it's another fun. But for me, it can be a self-help book, but it has to be well written. It has to be challenging enough for me to enjoy translating it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I buy a lot of those books, usually not in Portuguese. It's true. I'd rather, because my favorite authors are actually American and Canadian, so or German, but they actually write originally in English. So, and I guess it's kind of a standard in the spirituality realm. At least that's what I know. And so I understand what you mean by being well written and all of that, because sometimes, because people are not writers, right?
Yes.
They end up creating pieces of work that are a little bit more limited in terms of vocabulary.
And I've done some books, that it seems like they only use 50 verbs throughout the whole book, and then they are repeating the same idea over and over, and it's so boring to translate.
Yes, and I'm very afraid of buying books in Portuguese to be honest, because I bought one or two because that's where I found when I first looked for them, because I like finding those books in a more unconventional way. So it's sometimes they just come to me for even from dreams, believe it or not. But anyway, so I like getting them immediately, right? So I'll get whatever version they have. And I've had pretty bad things, especially from French, I have to say. Which is a bit strange because it's like a huge tradition of translating from French into Portuguese. There's lots of people who do it in Portugal. So, I mean, you wouldn't expect that. But I think that people probably think that those books are not deep enough, or that the content is not complicated enough, and therefore either you don't make an effort, or the people who are assigned the jobs are not
Or maybe
don't really understand what the author really meant.
yeah, maybe because the target audience it's also, I don't know, it doesn't have good reading habits, so it cannot complicate it.
But translating from French is quite complicated, because sometimes French people are very concentrated on France, and to transport it in another language is really sometimes is not so easy, because they are very focused on French history and French way of thinking, and to maybe it's the problem also the wrong authors for the Portuguese audience. So it's French is sometimes I get books to be can be should this book be translated or not? The publishing houses want to have opinion of myself, and then I say, no, this book it's a good book in France, but in Germany it won't work. So
I see. That's a great insight, I think. Right, we have a lot of books in Portugal in that subject that are actually translated into Brazilian Portuguese. That's what you can find most of the time. So that would be a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
So So thank you guys so much for this. This was amazing. This is my first attempt of understanding this part of the language business better, because it's something that I don't know anything about, obviously. But now I guess I have 3 friends who can help me figure out things in case I have questions. It was really nice to meet you. Thank you so much, Geaney, right? Geaney, right?
Yes, perfect.
And then Barbara Neeb.
Yes.
And then Mónia,
You can
Filipe,
join
what? Sorry, Barbara?
You can join my YouTube channel. If I Weltlesebühne has a YouTube channel on ourselves. So if you want to know more about literature translation, there are also some films on in English. So
you have
just
a channel on YouTube with videos
YouTube.
in English.
In English,
so you have to
most
give
of
me the
them are
link.
Germans, but to make literature translating more visible. We show other translators.
Yeah,
and
of course.
We talk about our translations.
So we'll get all of your links and whatever you want to put within the text of the podcast episode presentation. So yeah, just feel free to send me anything that you have about yourselves and anything that you believe it would be of interest to everybody. So thank you so much, you guys. Sorry
Thank
about
you.
my technical
Thank you.
issues. Because well, it happens every now and then, but
Yeah.
well, at least I can see you can see me. I guess this is all I can ask for. So thank you so much, you guys, and I cannot wait to see what people have to say about this episode, because I am very excited about it, because it's so, I think, original compared to my other episodes, not compared to the world, but so I really appreciate it that you took the time and that you accepted this idea of talking to other people who don't even know. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate it, and I will follow you around on LinkedIn. Don't worry.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you.